think sometimes when you're hyper individual or you're hyper focused on your own self, your own ambition, where you're going, that can be coming from a place of insecurity. And I say it's coming from a place of insecurity because if you're always in the state of, I have to get to the next level, I have to achieve this, I have to achieve that. Well, why? And I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm all for ambition, but why are you trying to achieve it? Are you trying to achieve it because you want the applause, you want the accolades, or are you trying to achieve it because you know somebody else is watching you and you know you're blazing the trail for the person next to you, or you have a family that you're trying to provide for, or you have a community that you're trying to lead. So when it comes to individualism, you're right, it is nuanced, but I think when you're improving upon yourself for something that's bigger than yourself, that's powerful. But when you're only going on the journey for you, I hate to say it, but you could be leading yourself to disappointment.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Jabir McKnight, and I'm the host of the Spark Podcast. And I have the amazing team from Reju with me, my guys, Dante Wade and Aaron Warrick, co-founders of the Reju application. Welcome. How are you feeling?
On, man. Feeling great.
Thanks for
Feeling
having
great.
us.
Absolutely, absolutely. To set the foundation for this conversation, um, I want to learn a little bit more about Reju for our audience and learn about your background. How did this come to be? What are some of the things that you went through, whether that is growing up in New Jersey and Philadelphia, respectively, your journeys at Lincoln University of Pennsylvania, your professional journeys, and just interactions that you've had with professionals that made you understand that this was a thing that you wanted to do. I know we talked a little bit offline that this wasn't a part of some 10-year plan. This wasn't a part of some grand scheme. It happened organically. And I think that's even more exciting. So whoever wants to kick it off first, let's start with your upbringing, family background, and then your journey and how you met each other.
Aaron, I could kick us off. Jabir, again, thanks for having us. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here. A little bit about myself and my upbringing before getting into Reju. So I'm born and raised in Newark, New Jersey, born into a large family. And I was actually born to a family of entrepreneurs. My mother, my father, and my uncle actually owned a restaurant that we lived on the second floor of. The restaurant was on the first floor. So my entire life, I literally grew up in business. Um, Ironic enough, I had no intention of actually being an entrepreneur or getting into business. My main focus was athletics. And, you know, eventually somewhere in high school, I discovered, all right, you're not going to the league. It's just not in your cards. So from there, I said, all right, maybe I could still work in some type of sports industry. So I said, I'm gonna just focus on working for a professional team. That led me to Lincoln University, where I was able to meet both of you amazing brothers, actually. And from there, you know, you graduate from college, you're like, all right, well, I could work for a sports team now. I could start my life off, and things just don't go as according to plan. And sometimes you actually have situations where you get what you want, but it's not necessarily what you were expecting, or it's not as grand as you thought it would be. So now you're in a weird space of, all right, well, what actually do I want to do with my life? And that actually took me down a journey of really just not only self discovery, but really sharpening my own mental health and wellness. Not to cut through the entire story, but I really hit a rough patch after graduation. And during that time, I actually cut off all social media. I started reading more. I started, you know, speaking more positive words over my life, getting more involved in my spiritual life. And that manifested into actually me dropping weekly inspirational messages in a group chat and turned into weekly motivational messages that I would drop on Instagram. And I always like telling this story because this is just how things aligned. I wrote earlier that year that I wanted to start a mobile application. I was like, I don't know what it's gonna be, but I want an app. I just feel like that's where we are in the times. And about a few weeks after dropping messages in the chat and posting Monday motivations on Instagram, Aaron actually texted me and said, bro, I see what type of vibe you on. I see what you're doing. I want to create a product where we can share this inspiration and motivation and really help people in our community. And that's a little bit about, my upbringing and how Reju was born.
Before we go to you, Aaron, I think it's important. I want to pull that when you were in high school
Hmm.
and you decided, well, maybe I don't have the talent to go to the league. Can you talk a little bit about like that journey? Like what made you come to that realization and how did you feel in that current moment? Because what I'm hearing earlier on was your ability, despite facing challenges, you were able to pivot even in high school.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny. Being an athlete, all you do is hang around athletes, and a large portion of your conversation is your ambitions as an athlete and where you want to go. I want to go D1. I want to go to the league. I want to do this, do that. And I didn't take pride in my intellect until probably 18, 17, 18. Because school came easy to me. I got good grades. It was just a part of myself too. So school was easy to me. But I want to say around my junior year of high school, one, the football team I was playing on, I had two all-state players ahead of me. So, I'm working with y'all in practice, but I wasn't getting no burn. So by the time I was actually starting and getting some traction, it was like, all right, this is a little too late. I don't have 4 years of tape or even 3 years of tape on. So at that moment, I said, all right, even if I do get to the league, let's say I work hard, dedicate myself, let's say I do get there, how long am I going to stay? And even if I do stay for, let's say, 10 years, I'm only going to be in my early 30s. I always just planned on living for a really long time. So I said I have to do something that, one, is going to be sustainable, and two, that I'm going to be happy through the duration of it. So yeah, it was a little tough when you admit, like, all right, I don't got the talent to go to a certain level. But at the same point, I'm talented in other areas. And that's what I told myself. Like, you're not a monolithic individual, you have multi talent. So tap into those other talents.
Love it. Love it. Aaron, next up.
All right, so I probably have a little story, but before I even get to that, I just want to say thank you, brother, for having me on here. Super excited to have this conversation. Philadelphia native, born and raised in Southwest Philly. Uh, Jabir, as you know, what Philly streets can be like growing up. To be quite frank, my upbringing, I was honestly really in the streets a lot. I hung with the wrong people. I got in trouble a lot. But the great thing is that I excelled very well in school and I was intelligent and I knew that. But I just also kind of got, I don't want to say influenced, but you just have the wrong things in your environment that can kind of take you away from what you should be focused on. I will say growing up, my mother understood and recognized my intelligence and, kind of some of my talents and hobbies. For example, when I was younger, maybe around 14 when MySpace came out back in the day, I had taught myself how to code at 14. I taught myself how to do websites, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and I was charging people to do their MySpace pages, friends, cousins, aunts, whoever, right? And I was making money doing that. And that was like my first indication, like, all right, you have an understanding of this. Throughout that time, my mother, she would always get me extracurricular activities to kind of keep me away from the streets and kind of away from negative influences. So I was in a NASA program in middle school. I competed in robotics, Japan. I was in math competition at Lehigh University. I did programs at like Swarthmore College, like you name it. Like I was just in a lot of STEM related fields. So I think that's where my background from STEM, tech, engineering really started to kind of develop. Once I got to high school, my dream was to go to Del State. I got into Del State, but we didn't have the resources. We were a modest family to pay for me to get into Del State. Student loans was crazy, and my parents couldn't afford that. So we were looking at the schools, and Lincoln was still like available. I got accepted into Lincoln. It was like, hey, come on board. It's in state. We can get cover some of his scholarship money or grants. And I didn't want to go to Lincoln because that was like right down the street. I'm from Philly, and Lincoln's 45 minutes away. And I'm like, I don't want to go to college. I told my mom, and she's like, well, if you don't go to college, you got to get out my house. And she kicked me out. So I ended up going to Lincoln, which is one of the greatest decisions I made in my life. Studied computer science at Lincoln University, took on active leadership roles, really had the ability to dive deeper into my understanding in engineering and tech. And that was set the stage and a foundation for me to have this conversation fast forward with Dante and mobile applications and how you develop and implement that. I never really had any type of, I never had a feeling to say, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted to be successful. I didn't know what that looked like, but I never thought like, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur. I always loved building things, watching a project come from an idea to real life. Like that was always my driving factor. But yeah, that's just a little bit about my background, where I came from and what led us up to Reju.
I love that. One of the things that I'm always in support of, I was just at an event 2 days ago, and one of the speakers talked about when you are preparing whatever you want to be successful in, it's important for you to have a group chat. And the best ideas make it out of the group chat if you are in the group chat with the right people, right? Because as soon as you have a thought, or if you have a wild idea like wanting to start an application and you share it with the right people that are not negative and they're contributing and they're active listeners, then they follow up on that and keep you honest with what you say you want, but you also have a diverse skill set, great things happen like Reju. So that's really cool. I'm glad that you all kind of had a conversation that came out of it. And I've been fortunate enough to watch this thing develop since the beginning. So tell our audience a little bit about Reju, the vision, the mission, and some of the accomplishments you've all had so far.
Yeah, I guess I'll pick up on that one and I'll pass it to you, Dante, if you want to add. So currently right now I serve as the co-founder and CEO of Reju, and Reju is an economical, engaging, and comprehensive mental health and wellness app that provide point-to-point therapy connections, really bridging the gap between our end users and licensed practitioners, while also providing a tailored experience to amplify mental health outcomes for individuals, right? Because Jabir, your health and wellness path, your journey looks different than mine. So our approach is, how do we make this a tailored approach so we can really provide specific resources for individuals? We developed a mobile application formerly known as Elevate that was founded more on self-help, more on meditation practices, breath work. And, we got great traction there. But what we also realized was that there was a greater need for clinical mental health, for telehealth, for marginalized communities who may suffer from health inequities, from not having the resources to kind of get these mental health capabilities at their disposal. So Reju, we really pride ourselves on having something that's accessible, that's affordable, right? But that's also edgy, and it doesn't feel like you're doing the work, right? It doesn't feel tough. It doesn't feel heavy. It's like, hey, it feels good to actually come to this and, kind of recognize where there's gaps or improve on, the things I have been doing in regards to my mental health. Before I pass it to, our traction and kind of the things we've been through, I wanted to pass it to you, Dante. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on Reju that I may have left out.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Aaron alluded to, my title is formerly COO and co-founder of Reju. And just in addition to the plethora of services that Aaron mentioned, as we scale as an organization, we're offering a variety of services just outside of the mobile application as well, from in-person activations, virtual events, trainings for staff in different departments. And it's really all centered around health and wellness. And we really want to be intentional around something Aaron mentioned earlier is, making it easy for people to use. We use the term a low barrier of entry, because the term mental health and wellness and the tips, the tricks, it's been really prevalent as of the last 4 years, but it could still be intimidating to people because these aren't conversations that traditionally we've had within our households and within our communities. So we really want to make it a point to be a low barrier of entry for somebody who they may be a quote unquote expert, or they may have been, deep into their mental health journey, or they may just be starting off, and we want to make sure that we're providing a service for them as well.
So talk about a little bit about some of those applications that you have. And I know you both are going to be in Washington, D.C. You're doing something with the Washington Wizards. I've seen some sit down interviews that you all have had with different marginalized communities talking about some of particular struggles that those communities are facing. As Black people, Black and brown people, we're not a monolith, right? Like we face similar challenges across the board, but depending on the community that you are represented, you also face very particular issues. How important is it to hone in on those issues, but also to a broader audience bring light to some of the challenges that particular communities are facing? And that doesn't have to just be particularly with Reju, but in your personal missions as well.
I'm so glad you said that we're not a monolith as Black people, because I think that's one of the largest misconceptions not only outside communities have, but us ourselves. Sometimes we have that misconception about ourselves. Funny enough, Lincoln is actually what changed my mind as to Black people being a monolith, because there I got to experience people from all varieties. You know, you have some Black people who are from lower end class areas to middle to higher class. You have Black people that are of different religious beliefs, and not just beliefs that fall under Christianity and Islam. So, you know, I think that's very important, because when you think through the different things that people go through, it's important to hear their perspective on, one, how did they overcome that issue, or did they overcome that issue at all? One anecdote I like to use: when I was living in Jersey, I was coaching football, and I had a young man who came to me before practice one time, and he said, you know, Coach Wade, I gotta leave. I can't finish the season. And I was like, why? And he said, well, my older brother got into some issues in the neighborhood, and he ended up killing somebody, and they want to retaliate against him and the family, and I'm not sure what to do about it, so my family is just making me leave. And I bring up that story all the time because there are certain issues that, if you haven't experienced it, it's really hard to give somebody just on the spot advice. But if you could give tools and resources to connect them to that advice, that guidance, I think that's how you change a community. And that's, you know, one of the personal drivers for doing what we do.
Excellent points. I was digesting everything you were saying, Dante. One thing that came to my mind when it comes to really like penetrating the community or saying, hey, right, like we want to highlight the importance of mental health and health equity. The first thing is really like, how do you educate and destigmatize kind of that negative connotation associated around mental health, right? Getting people to feel comfortable talking about it or expressing how they feel, or being open to see a practitioner or a therapist, or identifying other healthy activities that may be outside their normal realm, but it can help improve their mood. So that's always been really the challenge. Like, how do you even educate and destigmatize them before even saying, hey, here are the resources that are available to you? I think that was one of the greatest challenges in the kind of stepping into this realm. I think one thing that Reju has done successfully is making the conversation about mental health, as I said before, feel natural and make it feel comfortable. For example, we did a real series where we invite experts on during COVID, during a time where a lot of people was isolated, going through their own different mental health episodes and dealing with depression, anxiety. We would just go up there and just have a conversation like we're having right now. And people would share their triumphs, their struggles, what worked, what didn't work, right? Resources available. And, you know, people would give us a lot of DMs and messages. Yeah, I needed this. This encouraged me to see a therapist, or I'm in therapy now, or, you know, I got my family open to identifying resources. Some people may express like, where can I look for a resource, right? In this urgent need. So I think we really did a good job kind of mitigating the stigma against mental health and the challenges that come with that. So I would say that was one of the things that kind of really stood out as like, hey, as a foundational step that allowed us to penetrate the industry.
I love that. I'm glad that you talked about just like destigmatizing things. One of the things that came to my mind, and it's on a lower level, but I think it's a part of like the building blocks when we're talking about making things readily available. We have to give meaning to words. Have you ever heard of the book All About Love by Bell Hooks? Yeah? No?
That one.
Add that to your reading list if you haven't. But
Yeah.
that being said, there's also a book that I'm reading right now by Richard Reeves called Of Boys and Men. And it talks about why modern men are struggling from a lens of like education, policy, and different lenses. And one of the things that I'm thinking about across both of those books is giving words meaning. What does it mean to be a man, right? If it's to be courageous, right? If it's to be masculine, if it's to be stoic, what do those words actually mean though? and how do they show up in your life, and how are those words nuanced and have space for, it's not black and white, it's gray. You can be stoic, but also have a therapist, right? Like you can deal with adversity in a way that is not overly emotional, but also have an outlet to speak about how you're feeling, right? Why do you feel like you have to be stoic? Is it being courageous for your family? Is it you work better when you are writing things down to better understand what's going on? Okay, great. So for you to do that better, maybe you need to talk to a therapist so you can stay stoic, or you can stay in whatever masculinity means to you, and vice versa for women. So I love that you brought that up, because we have to give meanings to words, or if we don't destigmatize what certain words mean, then you hear them and you run away from them.
Exactly.
So that spoke to me. I love what you all are doing. Like you said, you have to bring the work to the community, especially if you're working with marginalized communities, so they better understand the amazing work that you all are doing. In regards to your audience right now, what is it made up of in regards to age and demographic currently?
Yeah, so
So
you want to tackle that?
yeah, I could actually jump in. So, majority of our audience is currently millennials and Gen Z. We've actually launched a very robust B2B business to business strategy in which we've been onboarding a lot of college students into our mobile application. The millennial side is really just from our generation, people supporting us, seeing, like-minded individuals and really downloading. When we go into the demographics of the app, a majority has been in the black and brown community. A lot of women have been supporting the application as well, and the numbers for men that have downloaded has actually been increasing as well, which we've been really excited about.
Yeah,
I love that.
I'll briefly add to that too. One thing we've also realized, we've also been able to tap into the workforce development space. So we've also been able to see a variety of people, maybe late 30s, early 40s, who are, maybe coming back from being reincarcerated or getting back into the, workforce after disability or something. We've also seen them utilize and engage with our application. Also, we have a lot of supporters and people who utilize our application in LGBTQ plus and other marginalized communities, and even Latinx.
And from those particular communities, so we have active college students, you said working professionals, and members of the LGBTQ community. What are some, I would say, targeted gaps that you're seeing across those communities that are more specific to those particular communities? I know, especially when you're talking about generations, like Gen Z, when we're talking about Gen Zers, they are dealing with a lot of mental health issues. I think it's about 70% of current Gen Zers, at least, are socialized, and they said that they have mental health issues, whatever that may be. That can be anxiety or depression, numerous other things. But we're living through unprecedented times. I don't even know if you can call it unprecedented times anymore, because it's just like it keeps occurring so much. I think it's just the times, right?
Right, just the times, right? Just the times.
So yeah, I would love to hear that.
That's an excellent question. I will say this: in our studies, our research and development, and doing assessments, as we've provided resources for different groups and communities, the impact and the barriers for each one looks totally different, and the solutions, the clinical solutions that are provided and recommended, also looks different. So for example, these are just some of the things that we learned over time, right? Many LGBTQ plus youth are more likely to commit or have suicidal thoughts, right? You realize in senior populations, they are more likely to experience depression or anxiety due to isolation when you get older and you're away from family or friends. You realize, right, younger generation, right, like they engage with social media and TikTok and Instagram, and there's also an impact on your mental health with overutilization of social media applications and the content that's there. You also have with Black and Brown and Latinx communities who historically have not received adequate health resources, and now you have this health inequity gap that impacts them. If it's socioeconomic, they can't get the resources. If it's I can't even get a car to go see a therapist. because I don't have insurance, right? It's so many different like barriers to these different groups, right? But one thing we learned, students, for example, academic stress, right? You know, your ability to show up to work, but you're stressed because you worry about if you're going to get fired tomorrow. So that impacts your productivity and how you show up at work. So those are like some of the different things we noticed in each group, but how we tackled and provided resources. We try to one work with industry leaders and partner with people both within the industry and within those sub industries and say, hey, how can we work together and collaborate to provide resources? You know, let's do the assessments, let's analyze and say what makes sense. For example, one thing we noticed and we studied was that students, instead of them doing an hour or hour and a half long therapy sessions, was more impactful for them is to do bite-sized pieces, 20-minute check-ins, 15-minute check-ins, because you don't have time as a student. I'm going from my first class to my next class. I got lunch. I got another class. Right now I got band practice. Right now I got to go practice for something else. I got to do homework. And then I got to prepare for midterms and I want to kick it with my friends or, you know, but they don't have time to sit down and have therapy. But what happens is if you can block out 15-minute, even 10-minute check-ins, that is more impactful, right, over time for students. So I think kind of finding those nuanced solutions that can kind of fit into people's lives without disrupting it has been a way for us to be super impactful when we provide these resources.
I think Aaron pretty much covered it. One thing I could add to that is when you think through the destigmatization efforts that we've had to implement, one thing we've noticed that a lot of the destigmatization work we've had to do is more so geared towards men than women. And it just seems as though a lot of our women users from the data that we've collected have just been more open and receptive to utilizing different mental health tools and resources for them. While men have been a little bit more closed off, and it's not something that we're necessarily surprised about, but it is something that we want to actively work towards because if you look at the statistics when it comes to suicide, Black men are increasingly committing suicide as opposed to any other demographic. So it's an alarming rate, and it's something that we really want to pay deep attention to. And, you know, it ties into a lot of things. You know, you mentioned earlier, you know, what is a man? And I feel like every man tries to answer that question. And sometimes when you get too many answers thrown back at you, you get lost. And when you get lost, sometimes you don't know what else to do. So that's something we're actively working towards.
So one of the things that came to mind, just really listening to some of the things that you're saying, you both have said about like structural issues that have caused us to be where we are today, right? And how you are addressing those concerns. Thinking of everything that's going on in the country today, like economically, if you're talking about, I mean, rising inflation, just thinking about that, right? Like, I think that's the lens I'm looking through it. What are some of the issues that you all are seeing based on the research that you're doing, conversations that you're having within different communities that you feel may be issues that are on the horizon? We won't hold you to these predictions, but I'm wondering what that is because I feel like, you know, when we look at things, sometimes we're always focusing on the problems of today, but the problems are today are based on the issues of yesterday. What are the issues of today that's going to cause the problems of tomorrow?
I'm about to get my soapbox, Jabir.
Hey,
So
you got it.
I have like a whole existential concern about the family structure in the Black community. And the reason I have a concern about it is because if you look back to previous generations, you know, oftentimes our grandparents were married, they were married for some time, you know, then our parents' generation came in, they were married, things of that nature. Whether they're still together or not, they were married at some point. And you know, when I think through for our generation and our peers, a lot of people have a really skewed view of what relationships should be or should look like. And there isn't a lot of space for grace for the other individual that you may be in partnership or relationship with. Shoot, we don't even have grace for ourselves oftentimes because we have this whole ideology that I have to have my entire life figured out by 27. And if not, like I'm a failure. And if I'm looking at myself as a failure, how am I supposed to merge or bring in a union with another person? So when I think through the family structure in our community, I always think, the stronger the family is, the stronger the community is. And, when you're able to build up your own household, you could build up the block that's around you, so on and so forth. And I think that that ties into mental health and the issues that people are dealing with, because when you're individually not able to get yourself to a space where you're happy, at peace, content with your life, if you bring that to a relationship and somebody else is also feeling the same way, it just causes a perfect storm. And let alone you procreate and have children with that person, what habits are you teaching that child? So when I think through the issues of today that can boil over into tomorrow, it really didn't start today. It's been started for some time, but it's the family structure. And I think when we take the time to do the work on ourselves, improve, heal, and find somebody who's also done that, now we can start changing the community. We can start changing family. We can start changing generations. But y'all know me. I'm the black love advocate in the room. So that's something I always think about.
I
Oh
love that.
man, oh, that was excellent, man. I don't know I'm gonna follow up from that one. Well, I'll say this right now. I won't try to get too political, but economic mobility is a foundation to one of the foundations to a successful and holistic life. One of the things I see happening, if there's an economic impact or some type of downward turn, more people lose jobs. I don't think people would have the financial resources, one, let alone to get therapy or clinical health, but just take care of their day-to-day lives, and the impacts on their mental health and stress is drastically going to increase. That's one thing I do believe could potentially happen. I do also think that not have if there's an economic downturn, that means there's less grants and resources to help boost economic mobility for businesses, small businesses, specifically in the clinical mental health space. So now you have practitioners who may be impacted on finding new clients because their clients aren't focused on their health, because I have to focus on surviving. And me going to a therapist isn't the first thing I'm thinking about. And now the therapists aren't receiving the clients that they're looking for, and they're also don't have the support that they would have in a positive economy, such as grants or other specific resources. I think that's going to impact them as well. So that's what I feel like, that just that dynamic supply and demand between help, resources, and the people who need it the most is going to be severely impacted. And I think that's going to be a trickle down effect, similar to what Dante said, right? How you provide for your families and, other areas of your life.
No, I love that. And I agree. One of the things that you said, Dante, that I want to pull the threads on. Let's have a conversation about it. When you talked about, how you feel about yourself individually and how that impacts the outside world, I think we're seeing a rise every year, it seems like, or every half a decade, in individualism, right? Like you said, how we feel inside is going to affect how we feel about the other people around us. But I think we're almost too individualistic, right? Like we care about how we feel more than how the community around us feel. We can be in a great communal situation, but you break away from that because you want to be in a better position yourself,
Yeah,
right?
that's a good point.
And it's not a disagreement. I think it's a nuanced
I
view.
know, and let's have
Yeah.
a conversation on it, because
Yeah.
I think sometimes when you're hyper individual or you're hyper focused on your own self, your own ambition, where you're going, that can be coming from a place of insecurity. And I say it's coming from a place of insecurity because if you're always in a state of, I have to get to the next level, I have to achieve this, I have to achieve that, well, why? And I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm all for ambition, but why are you trying to achieve it? Are you trying to achieve it because you want the applause, you want the accolades, or are you trying to achieve it because somebody else is watching you and you're blazing the trail for the person next to you, or you have a family that you're trying to provide for, or you have a community that you're trying to lead. So when it comes to individualism, you're right, it is nuanced, but I think when you're improving upon yourself for something that's bigger than yourself, that's powerful. But when you're only going on the journey for you, I hate to say it, but you could be leading yourself to disappointment, because if you're only doing it for yourself and nobody else beyond you, well, we all have a limited time on this earth. So you could check off every box, but you're just gonna add more tasks to do to your list.
I agree exactly. I agree with that wholeheartedly. There's this term, the fivefold why. Have you both heard of that? It's like five layers to it. And then once you get to the fifth one, you know exactly why you're doing it. You have so many people. I want to be a millionaire. Why?
Yeah.
So I can get married. Why? Or I want to provide for my family. Why do you feel like you need to have $1 million? Because at the root of that, you may just want $1 million so you can provide a certain life for your family. Now, before you go on that individual journey and do that, maybe you should have a conversation with your partner to see, maybe you don't even need to wait to do that. Y'all can do it together.
Or maybe you don't need $1 million.
Or maybe you don't need $1 million.
Or maybe you do.
If you really sit down and talk about it, you may not need it.
Maybe you need 10 million. But either way, if you spend the next 5 years working on $1 million and you really needed 10, y'all could have did it better together. So I think to your point, like starting with the bigger picture, like I'm doing this for a community, sharing it with the community, and then you never know what comes from that. You can have your individual part in that, but share with that trusted community what you're trying to do. If I'm not mistaken, that's how Reju came about.
Absolutely.
100%. I mentioned it earlier. This was a personal project that I just wrote down in my journal that I wanted. I didn't know Aaron was going to call me at the end of the year. I didn't know we were going to be aligned on what we wanted to do. But when you're working towards something that's bigger than you, sometimes God opened doors that you didn't plan on or didn't know would be open.
And it's important that you have to lead with a mission or something that gives you conviction, man. You'll get burnt out. You'll get stepped on, man, and you need something that's gonna, you know what, I gotta, roll my sleeves up again tomorrow.
Really quickly. So I want to hear about some of the challenges that you faced. When was Reju founded? What year?
So if we gonna go off the first phone call,
Yep.
it was December 2018.
December 2018. So we're in 2025 now.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about some of the pivots that have come along the way, good and bad, and what you learned from them. Because 2018 to 2025 might as well be 20 years. That's like three different generations.
20 years. All right, I can start this off, man. I gotta lie, Dante. If I start going on my soapbox, and this hit me with something.
Tell your truth.
Right, I'm gonna pivot to the different sections of business. So I think the first thing is right. Is finance, right? It's funding. That was one of the major challenges. Black and brown businesses got less than 1% of investment funding last year, and that number has been significantly less over the previous year. So I remember there was times where myself and Dante were pitching to 500 plus investors, and it was, oh, there's too much competition, or you maybe not focused on the wrong industry. You need to make a little bit more money. Oh, you need more users. You know what? Maybe you should switch this angle up. Or, we don't think you have a strong enough team. The goalposts kept being moved even when we hit those marks or even surpassed them, right? So that was one of the major things, and that led us to bootstrap. So we was like, you know what? We're not raising no money. We're going to do this on our own. We're going to pick the money up what we need to do. We're going to close some deals. Thankfully, we did do a pre-seed round. So we did raise our first round, some incredible investors and advisors who really believed in us, but that took years of getting there, right? Where people who may or may not look like us with less traction, you just got a pitch deck, go up and share this, and it's like, hey, here is what it is, right? But it's the journey. I remember one time I went to go to a pitch competition, actually in Mexico, and blowing it away, outstanding job. And everyone thought I was going to win. And I didn't win, and I wasn't really pissed off about it. And I remember, though, one of the judges in the audience was like, basically said, hey, man, I don't think you have a great business model. I don't think it's going to work. And it's quite frankly, who will buy this? That's pretty much what he said, right? And I'm just like, oh, okay. So I walked off. I didn't take it personal. We had a little banter. We kept it moving. The co-founder of Starbucks was there. He was one of the people in the audiences. He walked up to me, and the dude was standing next to me. He was like, hey, man, I just want to introduce myself here, Aaron, right? I'm like, yeah, he introduced himself. He's like, hey man, I watched all these pitches today and yours was phenomenal. You're the only person that did exceptional, hit all the points. I know this is not your first rodeo. You know what you're doing. He's like, whatever you're doing, keep it up. And that was like the confirmation I needed. And the dude who said all those things about me that's standing next to me was sitting there looking stupid. So I was like, yeah, like, all right, but that was a major challenge, right? I would say another one was technology and more so funding and to get the resources for it. But when we started moving with our technology, one of our development partners was in Ukraine. And this was right when the war occurred. So we had to do a hard pivot. There was other factors there, but that was something we did not anticipate, right? That was impactful to our business. So we're like, yo, we have to pick back up, find new partners, relearn everything, and continue the motion that we had. So those were just like some of just the many barriers that we have. And I will pass it to Dante to see if he has a few more. But those are just some things that came top of mind.
Hold on, before you go, Dante, developer partners in Ukraine. So that how far along in the process in development were you before you had to scrap that work?
Man, we were at the tail end. If there's 7 or 8 sprints to complete it, we probably were like at 6. We probably didn't spit over, at that time probably $50,000 in development efforts. We're deep in it, man. But everything happens for a reason, right? So it turned out to still work out for us. Work out well.
And really two things to Aaron's point. One, the development team we actually ended up switching to, we didn't have the greatest relationship with, so it had its own set of hurdles, challenges, and problems. And when you're working with a technology team and you're a startup company, our superpower is being fast. That's any startups. Your superpower is being fast. But when you have delays with your technology, it almost puts you kind of like in handcuffs when it comes to hitting those milestones that you want to hit. And one particular rough time I could think of, and Aaron, he could remember this. We had a presentation for a client and we came in the day before, and Jabir, when I say we were literally preparing the app for the presentation, all the data in the app wiped out the night before. All the data in the app and it wiped out at 1 a.m. So we stayed up till 4 to put everything back into the app. Fast forward, we get to the presentation and the technology is not doing what it's supposed to do with this new development team that we had. And this is one of our premier clients at the time. We were super
highest
excited.
deal.
Highest deal at the moment. And the demo did not go the way it was supposed to go. And we're there in person. It wasn't a virtual thing. We flew in, we had our Reju shirts and everything, and it just didn't happen. And I bring up that story because I could say, without getting into the technicalities, the toughest part about this whole journey has probably been staying encouraged to keep going throughout the duration. Because Aaron mentioned it earlier, we've pitched over 500 times. We've been told no over 500 times. And he just talked about one example. We even pitched for Chameleonaire. He had a I believe it was it a accelerator program, or he had a
Yeah,
grant.
man. Oh, you about to make me go
Yeah,
down memory lane. I forgot about that.
he personally emailed us back saying why we were rejected. He personally emailed us back saying why we were
What was
rejected.
the reason?
I'll send you a screen. If I can find it, I'll send you a screenshot.
It was a long email. I'm gonna put it like that. It was a long email, and he touched on points. We may be too early, not enough traction. The things we've always heard, and that's why I say remaining encouraged has been the thing, because we have this deep passion inside of us for our mission to really enact and help people heal and bring change to our community through mental health and wellness resources. And when you're constantly told no, you naturally doubt sets in. You're like, am I on the right track? Are we doing the right thing? And beyond keeping ourselves encouraged, we got a team that we got to keep encouraged. So it's sometimes getting in that team meeting and saying, hey, we didn't get that deal, or getting in that team meeting and saying, hey, we missed the mark here, and continuing to do it day in and day out. But you mentioned the good things too, so I'm going to say something good about it. In the midst of every struggle that we've had, there's always been a small reminder, whether it's a sign, a moment, a vibe, whatever you want to call it, that would tell us that we have to keep going every single time. And that's what gives us the encouragement to keep going.
Give me an example of that. Like, was it something that when you said a vibe, I think it's so important to be open, right? And take that downtime, as I'm sure you both have in between some of the rougher patches. Sometimes you gotta give yourself a day or a week or a month, however long it is, to allow yourself to naturally go through the phases of disappointment and rejection and allow a sign to find you. I find that sometimes your mind is very clouded, or you're so focused on always feeling like you have to make something happen, then you miss the signs that will come to you. Because those signs are always there. You just got to be in tune.
Love
So
the way you put that. I love the way you put that. And I think that's, if I'm being honest, Dante, that's when we see those moments when like they presented themselves to us, right? I would say one, having a very strong team, a team that believes in you and uplifts you when, days you're tired, like I can't do this. Right. Having a great founding team that believes in the mission, man, is days me and Dante get on a call or Greg and vent and, uplift and encourage each other. And that's how the company was founded. Also our advisors and our investors, like they get behind us. They're like, yo, like this is a great idea, like keep it up. Like they speak positivity into us, and that's important too. There's many people who need these resources who's like, yo, this has changed my life. And I screenshot it if it's nothing personal, but I keep those as a reminders, like people are utilizing this and it's helping them and their families. So I feel like those are some of the things that have really pushed us. And then when you find champions, it could be a friend walking down the street, it can be some big time player in the space that's like, this is innovative. Like y'all got what it takes, right? And you may, for example, when we went to go pitch and that guy said that, rejected us, and then the co-founder of Starbucks kind of gave us that praise. Like that was a moment that this is going to push me another 6 months, a year or two, right? So those were the things that I think that like just really kept us going. And even outside of that, like when we will pitch and, we'll close our deals and kind of push that milestone, like, okay, our first deal that we made with a big client, let's say it was our first ever check we ever got. Right now, our next one is 3 times that. Then the one following that maybe 5. Then we made him miss a couple more deals, but then now we got one that's 10 times more. So even those like milestones, right, which isn't always, is gradual, right? It isn't from A to B. I think that's has also kind of gave us that reassurance that like what we're doing is working and we need to stick with it.
I have another question for you both. And this is for the entrepreneurs that are listening. This is for the young innovators that are listening. I want to talk about 2 things. And these things may be diametrically opposed, so we can tackle them one at a time. The importance of mentorship and your personal development and entrepreneurial development. And then the second part is trusting your gut despite the insight that you may receive from advisors. I think that's something that's very real. It's going to occur because that strategic insight is coming from a place of wisdom, but it also can be coming from a place of past innovations versus you have an insight into where the world is today and where it's going and where you want Reju to go better than anyone else. So I would love to hear that perspective.
that's a good question. I'm gonna try to answer both of those questions at once because they can be viewed as opposite ends of the spectrum, but I think they go hand in hand. So the first point with the importance of mentorship, it's super important. And when I mention mentorship, a lot of the time we feel like we're more alone than what we really are. And we may feel like nobody understands us, nobody understands the journey. Yes, you're the only one that has lived your life and your own experiences. However, there's nothing new under the sun. And if you're going through something, I'm sure there are 5 more people, maybe even in your network, that have gone through the same thing that you've gone through. Sometimes you stay in the storm longer than you have to be when you don't open your mouth and tell somebody the issues that you're dealing with, the questions that you need answering to. So when it comes to the importance of mentorship, it's really vetting your network and understanding who can I talk to that could potentially help me in this specific situation. And even if they can't give you the answers, if they could give you a lending ear and a wise voice, that's a lot better than playing the mental gymnastics within your head. Jabir, to your second point, when you get those mentors and you make them board members and advisors for your company, a part of you is like, all right, well, they have my best interest. They have my company's best interest at heart. If they tell me to do something, let's do it because they probably know best. But nobody knows your company like you know your company. Nobody knows where you want your company to go like you want your company to go. And sometimes disagreement can be healthy. So if if they're making a suggestion, feel free to push back. Feel free to say, well, why do you see it that way? Why do you look at it that way? Hear them out. And then you have to make a decision, for what you think is best for your organization. But in making that decision, you also have to be at peace with knowing that you may be wrong. And it's okay if you're wrong. The business won't fold off one bad decision. That's something that entrepreneurs need to hear. Your business won't fold off one bad decision, depending on how bad the decision is, of course. Don't go to jail or anything. But more than likely, your business won't fold off one bad decision. So when it comes to disagreements with advisors, mentors, you do have to go with your gut. Sometimes your gut may not give you the result you want, but you always go with your gut.
Yeah, I agree that one thing I would say is the reason why it's important to have mentors, and I'll try to answer both. One of the things for me is accountability. People who hold you accountable, they put the fire under you, because they care, but also believe in a vision. That's something a lot of us take for granted, right? And there's been times where like we got drilled in like, hey man, you guys can be doing this or you should be doing that, and rightfully so. But I do also think that when people don't walk specifically day to day in your shoes, they may have unrealistic expectations based off of lack of data and information. And I think that's when that gap happens. And that's when me and Dante, and Greg or the team will get together like, what do we think we should do based off of the information that we have and the goals we're trying to reach? And we got to make a sound decision and be comfortable with that decision that we made. So it's important to have, mentors and advisors. One, you get to your goal faster. Mistakes that they've made, they can help you kind of stay away from. And it could pitch you on new information that you had no idea, that was available. And there's many things I've learned over time, that they help exponentially increase my learning curve. So it's important to have them, but also, be confident in you and whatever you're developing or going after, and, stand firm, 10 toes down, right? And trust the people who's been with you day to day in this journey. I feel like their voices are the soundest through experience and through grit. So you want to always fall back to them at the end of the day.
Love that. That's extremely important to your point. I like everything that you said about mentorship and advisement, like leveraging their expertise, their experiences, their wisdom, their networks. But based on who you are, like you have to activate that in them. You can only take it as far as the lessons that you've personally learned. And that's my advice to anyone that's listening, right? Like you have to bump your head to learn your own experiences as well. Mm-hmm. That advisement is there. That advisement is there so you don't make, to Dante's point, that mistake that's so grand that you can't make it back from. But you have to learn. You have to learn a lesson. So when you are doing those pitch competitions and they say you have a strong team, where does a strong team come from? Personal experience.
You know what they say about experience? Experience is something you get when you don't need it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
I don't want it.
Right.
Yeah. So, I think those are like really good spots. I think I would love to get a personal anecdote, anything that you want to leave from the audience that you have not touched on yet. Any parting words for students, young professionals, seasoned professionals that are looking to pivot into entrepreneurship, or anyone else that comes to mind? Leave an idea that will spark a new theme for them. And that can be an anecdotal story or some experience that you've had that you think they would appreciate.
Kick things off, man. So one thing I would want to leave any entrepreneur, any viewer with is sometimes the most traumatic or the roughest things that you've been through in your life can propel you in the direction that you were always meant to go in. When I say that, one thing I didn't mention about, my story, my upbringing, I had two grandmothers that suffered from Alzheimer's. And in both cases, my family was the primary caretaker. I'm the oldest in my family, so I was very prevalent in assisting both of my grandmothers. And during that time, not only did I notice their mental deterioration, but I noticed how it affected our larger family as a whole. Just from, watching the person that you love, matriarchs of the family, turn into individuals who may not even know their name, let alone your name. So it was from that experience that I really realized the importance of mental health, of taking care of yourself, of, elevating to your highest level in order to operate best for yourself and those around you. Fast forward, last year I got laid off from my job and I dove into Reju full time. And I could say without hesitation, it was probably the toughest moment of my adult life. I'm married. I had a 1 year old at the time. She's 2 now. And oftentimes when you're in the midst of these tough times, you don't know a way out, and you may question, God or the higher power you believe in, and say, why is it happening to me? But the whole reason I say all this is just because I want to say, if you don't look at the situation as why is it happening to me, as opposed to what can this situation do for me, you could grow past whatever you're going through if you look at it with the right mindset. So to any entrepreneur, any viewer, no matter what you're going through, try to see how you could grow past this situation and make it part of your testimony and not your downfall.
Excellent. Man, I got to stop going after Dante. Like, I don't know how to follow up. All right, I want y'all to keep it straight and simple. One thing I want to leave with everyone is that we see people hit milestones and be successful, build businesses or build a strong personal brand. The reason why these people have done it is it because they have some secret sauce, or they're super intelligent, or they have this pot of money that they could just use for resources. Is mainly because people showed up, and they continue to show up. They showed up when times got tough, hard, when they didn't want to. They did the things that they didn't want to do when they needed to do it. And I say this to say, keep showing up, right? If you think it's going to take you 2 years, times that by 5. Right. And, throughout those times where you feel tired or you don't think it's working, like, show up again and show up again. That's all I will leave you with, is just keep showing up, be consistent, have dedication. And over time, you will see that consistency will start to pay off. I would say last thing I'll just quickly add is, if you're having trouble identifying what's your lane, or who are you, or where you want to be, one thing that worked for me is identify the things that make you happy and the things that make you feel good, and leverage that to identify, okay, how can I use that to kind of, find the area in life, right? I was always good in tech. I loved engineering. I love helping people. I love building things. So I said, how do I utilize those interests and pair it with other things to say, hey, let me build something that can help people who may also benefit from that need or that talent that I may have. But yeah, that's just the things I'll leave, man. Keep it simple and straightforward.
Love it. Aaron Warrick, Dante Wade, CEO and COO of Reju. Make sure that you download the application. The link will be in the bio. And as always, we do hope that this conversation sparked a new idea within you.